Also, we have free books for everybody that came that knows it. When you go out, we will give you one of the books. One of the main books, there's a variety of titles, but one of the main books, the one we have the most of, is a collection of all the stories I didn't sell. It means that they're not that good, but there's autobiographical material in between each, so it's kind of a memoir mixed in with it, and I like to think that's well worth it.
There's no such thing as a bad joke.
I remember when that book came out, I told Joe they should call it Shit Before Breakfast.
What's it called? What's that book called?
It's called, let's see, for a few stories more.
And it's got a really ugly picture of Joe on the cover.
Yes, it does.
The painting of it.
It looks a malicious landscape.
You're a tough person to paint. Our artists
I know.
have a hard time too.
People always have it hard to do.
And not only that, the person who did it was a good artist.
Yes.
He was a really good artist. And he turns like, wow, that's really, I had nothing to do with the book, I just knew about it.
He's tough.
It's tough. So I'm going to start with the obvious question, save y'all from asking these questions, some of them.
But you will get to ask questions.
You get to ask questions. So, Hansi, why Joe? Why documentary about Joe? What led you to this?
Oh, God. Well,
You have to speak up loud, because we don't have a
we
microphone.
do have mics.
Oh, we do?
Yeah.
We're just not using it.
No.
You and I.
No, probably not.
I do. No?
Okay.
I'm gonna.
Can you all hear us back there?
Yeah.
I
Hey,
thought-
how's that? Is that good? Everybody? Okay. Now you're fucked. I have a mic in my hand.
We'll probably use a jury to go up and run and ask people.
I'm happy to.
All right. Okay, so I've been reading Joe since the 80s. Loved his work forever. Finally, it was my first time in Texas 2 years ago. I was at a con in Houston, and not knowing how big Texas was, I was like, Joe, can I come and interview you? And he's, of course, he's like, come to Nacogdoches, we'll have lunch. And I did, and went out to lunch with him and Karen, went to the dojo, interviewed him. And he was amazing and wonderful and everything I thought he would be from reading the stories. And then when I did my Joe Bob Briggs doc, I asked Joe if he would send me a video. And Joe's like, nah, I don't know how to do that, but I'll write you something. And like 24 hours later, he sends me this incredibly beautiful, funny, perfectly Lansdalean piece about the drive-in and Joe Bob Briggs that just like made me like cry and laugh. And I said to Joe, like, the next doc is about you. So that's how that happened. And then once we started with Joe, it turned into like a biography rather than, because normally I would have approached it from a fan angle. And Joe's like, we can't have 4 hours of people just saying I'm great. That's not a story. So we could have though. But since Joe was willing to spend time talking to me and telling me his stories, we had that. So that was the story.
And there are a lot of people that are listed that are going to be on the DVD. That was too long to get all of them on the cut.
So Joe, how do you feel about watching all these people talk wonderful things about you? Okay, maybe it wasn't the whole documentary.
I thought they were holding back, actually. No, I tell you what, I'm very serious. It was very, very moving. And Casey, at the end, you really touched me, you know. But anyway, I really felt that my life's work is appreciated, which is fine. I've always been, you know, I'm not looking for that, but it's nice to have it. And it's certainly nice when people respond. I mean, I didn't get into this to be famous or rich, though, you know, rich is good, you know, but I got into it because I never wanted to do anything else for a living. The only thing I ever wanted to do was that, martial arts, and most important, the family. And those are the three things that matter to me. And so I'm very appreciative, Hansi, of you taking the time to do this, and all of the people that were in it. And I'm just surprised in a way, you know, because you don't really know that. You know, you got fans, you know, you hear from people, but you're always a little surprised to hear that kind of impact. I was at a signing in Tulsa, and a guy came up to the table, and really rough-looking guy, you know, he said, you know what? I said, what? And he said, you changed my life. And I said, well, how was that? And he said, happened later. He said, you made me let go of a lot of hate. He said, I felt racist and I'm homophobic. All that stuff was me. And he said, when I read these books, I got hooked on them, and I began to have a different point of view. And when that happens, you know, and maybe it doesn't happen much, but when it does happen, you think, you know what? Maybe that's worth it, because it's a ripple in the pond. Because then he carries on his own ripple in the pond. So it makes you feel good, you know. And this guy was saying all that stuff. I love him, you know. Very
As long as
talented.
the check clears, you're all right.
Well, no, it's very talented. And my niece and her husband are here somewhere. There, what are you doing way back there? Yeah, and you know, yeah, and having having the family and having friends and then just fans, it's extremely nice.
All right, well, I think we probably should open it up now and see what other people have to say. I'm gonna get my runner, who's also the person who.
You want me to run up?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna have you.
Popcorn, Dan?
Yeah.
I've had plenty.
Okay, so let's go. All right, way back there.
Me?
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't know if I need it, but.
Yeah, you do, Brad. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
hey Joe. Long time ago, I lived in Lawrence, Kansas, and I knew a guy named Crispin Burnham, who ran a small press horror magazine called Eldridge Tales. And I remember being at Crispin's house one night with a bunch of other people. We had a writing group, and he showed us the new issue, which had an installment of a story by a guy I'd not heard of at the time named Joe Lansdale. And it was a story called Dead in the West. And I was wondering if you could talk about Dead in the West and how the heck it wound up in Eldridge Tales.
Yeah, that's a good one. You know, when I went full time, yep, there you go. It's in Dead Man's Road. When I went full time as a writer, I had these contracts, and the guy that I was actually had contracts writing other people's books under their name. And as I got started in that, the guy that I was doing it for, he had a falling out with his publisher, and so suddenly I don't have these contracts. I got paid some money, but then I thought, man, I got to get a book done, and I really, really love westerns, and I really love horror films. And there was an old western that I was watching at that time. I'm sitting there thinking, well, what am I going to do? Curse of the Undead, which is one that I'd seen many times before. For whatever reason, it turned some kind of knob in my head, and I wrote it. Well, after I wrote it, nobody wanted it because it was a combination of things. They go, what do we do with this? Who's going to buy this? And so Eldridge Tales was this small magazine that I read about probably in another magazine because we didn't have the internet then, obviously. And so I submitted it to him, and he bought it, and that led to another version as a novel. So that was really an important moment, and I wonder about him from time to time. I don't know if he's still around or not.
Last I heard, he was still around, but he always did stay at home. He never drove anywhere, never went anywhere. He always stayed at home. So as far as I know, he's still there.
He probably hasn't left that chair. Yeah, that's what I knew about him too. But really nice man, and very important to the career, actually.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
All right.
He's got to earn his piece. All right, go
All
ahead.
right. Hey gang, I love your work, and one thing I was going to say that your work's been adapted by great filmmakers like Coscarelli, Mickle.
Is this Jim?
It's Jim, yeah, Chet's bud, yeah. And Demichi and Mickle. Anything being planned for the future of adapting your work?
Yeah, there's a lot of it actually. The Thicket, Peter Dinklage, is supposed to shoot that next year if all goes well, And thank you, Yuri, for that. I appreciate that. Right. But that one's supposed to happen. The Edge of Dark Water is optioned at the moment. There are a number of short stories that are optioned. There's some that people may not know because Love, Death, and Robots did 2 of my stories that came out this year on Netflix, because there's 2 of those are mine. They're little 10-minute shorts. And, yeah, The Dump and Fish Night. And there are a number of other novels and short stories that are under option. I wrote a story called The Projectionist, and my son Keith did an adaptation of it, and it got optioned for me as a director and him as the writer. So we're going on our second option on that, and a third one is supposedly underway, but that looks very likely. So there's quite a few of those things.
Very good, thank you. I need to get my hands on Christmas with the Dead, though. So I've heard.
Christmas with the Dead, which it was made on a shoestring and it was frayed. But it's being looks like it's going to be remade as Christmas with the Damned, and it's going to have a lot more money, and my son is directing it. So.
Yeah. Oh,
Got another. We won't forget you.
All right. I may be the only fan here from Gladewater, Texas. Beth Bowles,
Hi,
Shepherd.
Beth.
Hey, so.
Go Bears!
Go. But first of all, I want to tell you that the staircase in the cozy was not outside.
Yeah, I couldn't remember. I said
You went,
that
right,
wall was
you
there.
went through a door, the black kids went through a door.
Right.
And then went upstairs, and it was, that's the way it was.
Thank you. I knew it was in that area, and I
Right.
couldn't quite remember.
Second, I was gonna have to ask you where you lived, because when I was a kid, I could see the drive-in from my window.
Oh my gosh!
I
Did you
know.
live out on Highway 80?
Yes, on Old Highway.
We were in the
80.
same house.
I know.
There was the drive-in was on the opposite side of the highway from where we were,
right.
and there was a honky-tonk, and then there was a slight hill, and we were up on that hill.
I'll be darned. Well, we were on Old Highway 80, but we
Well,
were
yeah.
high enough up that we could still
Same
see the
thing.
drive-in.
Same
Yes.
thing. We were probably neighbors.
There you go.
Did you have a storm shelter?
No, I did not.
Well,
I
that's
did
not the storm shelter I hid in when we had that tornado then.
Right. Well, the question I have is, and it does go back to Gladewater, because if you're from there and you moved away, you have a rather, what's the word I'm looking for? A mosaic view, maybe, of the time there and of the city and the good and the bad and the ugly.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you had to put an image of Gladewater on a book, what would it be?
I think if you're just doing the image, it looks like I think it looks like just any downtown East Texas place. In fact, on a cover of A Fine Dark Line, that's very reminiscent of Gladewater, you know. But there were some shadowy things there then, and I had some really dark experiences, and I know a lot of my friends did. And now what's funny is it's an antique town for people for antiques. They've got a museum, which I'm about to be in the museum, which makes me I have mixed feelings about that, you know.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm a museum patient.
Yes.
And it's got restaurants, and one whole block is a bookstore.
Can we get a rocking chair?
None of that. None of that was there when I lived in Gladewater,
Me
obviously.
neither. No.
But I have mixed feelings about Gladewater. I really do.
I think people. Really
Yeah, because when I was growing up, and probably I don't know how old you are, but during the period from the 50s on, it was a rough old oil town, and
Yes.
the oil had played out, and the town was made up of a lot of roughnecks and a lot of prostitutes, a lot of poor people, a lot of people who were just barely surviving, and a few people who had profited off the oil boom. And so it was a town that did not exist well until the oil boom, and then after that it kind of declined, and then in the last few years I've actually enjoyed going back, you know. I go, over there's where they wrecked that car, I remember them.
All the cool musical history that you showed me that we didn't put in the film, with Johnny Cash riding
Yeah.
the line at the hotel in Gladewater, and then the radio station where Jerry Lee Lewis had scratched his.
Let me say something about that. And one thing too is that there is an old radio station there. And Elvis Presley, early in his career, sang live on that station. Johnny
Yes,
Cash,
I did.
you had Jerry Lee Lewis, Ray Price, all of these people. Well, what a lot of people don't know, that after Sun Records and the Grand Ole Opry, Gladewater was the most important place to the development of rockabilly. And they've started to recognize that and put up things that related to rockabilly because, it's got that legacy, and a lot of people don't know it. And I was hearing them on the radio when I was just a little bitty kid playing live, but I didn't realize that, But that radio station went out of business, and they turned it into music recording. Now they record music there. And in fact, our daughter did a couple of songs there to have that connection. And on the wall, Jerry Lee Lewis wrote his name, and he wrote his name on a soundboard, which they ripped up and put on the wall. And so it's kind of a shrine to rockabilly, and people ought to, they care about that. That ought to be a destination to check out. Oh, and the old hotel where they stayed, they still have Elvis's card with his name on it. We stayed there, and Johnny Cash wrote "I Walk the Line" in Gladewater.
Well, you and Randy Turner are both from Gladewater,
That's
and I
right.
think that speaks well of it.
Well, Randy, yeah, he graduated. Did anybody here know the Big Boys? No, they were a band that he was part
Early
of
punk
here.
rock.
And he, and he did a lot of art and stuff. Nice guy.
So I couldn't help but notice, because I've known Joe for many years, I've listened to a lot of these films, oh yeah, Johnny come lately. I couldn't help but notice, because I spent a lot of time with the Lansdales, that when you started telling stories, both your daughter and son got up and left.
I've heard this.
And I'm going to embarrass Karen here for a second, because one of my favorite moments with Karen ever was in Chicago at the World Fantasy Convention, and we were in a hotel room at a party. And Joe, it was like 60 people at the party, something like that. And the party had evolved into Joe telling stories. The 60 people around there. And when Joe started, Karen goes up, she goes, big yawn. She goes, oh. And every time she looks at her, goes, I've seen these, I've heard all these, I'm going to bed.
You got somebody wrong. Is that Scott?
How did you, or when did you first know you were really big in Italy?
The first trip I went over there, they invited us over, and and I said, hey, they're gonna pay for us to go. I'll probably go over there and shake hands with somebody and sell 4 or 5 books, but we get to go to Italy. And when we arrived, the drive-in was coming out there, and so it was a big Torino book fair, which is a monstrous thing. And so when I came there, I said, I'm ready to sign books. They said we don't have any. And I said, oh, did I get them printed? I said, no, we sold them all out the very first day. Said every copy is gone. And so it was a lot. Yeah, it was a lot. But then after that, all of a sudden, things just started booming there. So that was 2002 or 2001. It was, I think that was when it was. And then all of a sudden, it just boomed. And it's weird because I'll be walking down the street and people recognize me, which is really good for your ego for about 2 weeks. And later, you're just glad to get back home where nobody knows you, or they know you, but they don't care, And the dog goes, yeah, I know that guy.
I have a great interview with Seba, your translator, your Italian translator, and in the middle he's like yelling at his mother in Italian. It was great, but he had some wonderful things to say about you. But it was too much to add, so we'll have for the featurette. But I did reach out to the Torino Film Festival and asked if they want us to bring the documentary. So if we can squeeze in a trip to Italy, I'm coming.
Yeah. So, and did we say that these other interviews are on the DVD or will be?
Yeah.
I do have a question for you. So how did you get in touch with all these famous people, these big people that you interviewed? I mean, these are not people that are always easy to get in touch with. So how did you go about getting Bruce Campbell to talk to you about
Oh, that was Joe.
Yeah,
I mean,
well-
so some of them I just reached out to because I'm ruthless, and I'm just like, hey, I'm doing a documentary. Want to be part of it? And they respond. And then other people, you have to go through the layers of people. So the people that had to go through layers of people, Joe helped me, and like Bruce or James Purfoy, he had to sort of get them on. And Joe Hill, actually, I got through his people, surprisingly enough. And the really interesting story about Joe Hill is he said reading The Drive-In is what made him want to be a writer. And I'm like, dude, you're kidding. Like, does he know that? But,
So that's why Steve don't call, don't write.
But yeah, somebody was just, just reaching out to them. And Joe was also really helpful. And he kept sending me names. Like, go talk to this person, talk to that person.
Any more questions out here? A bunch of them.
You talked in the documentary about needing to become a writer when you read some stories.
Yeah.
What was the transition from feeling that you wanted to be a writer, needed to be a writer, and when you considered that you were a writer?
Oh, that's an interesting question, because a lot of people think they're a writer because they want to write, but you're not. And some people think that they're a professional writer because they write, and you're not. You may be a writer, but you're not a professional writer till you are a professional writer. And that's what I wanted to be. That's all I ever wanted to be, And when I read Edgar Rice Burroughs, I thought there's somebody on the other end of this really making a living at this. I had no idea it was dead, because that was everything was new to me. I'm 11 years old. But to me, I don't really know. I wrote an entire book when I was 11, 12, and 13. That was actually, with some revisions, published years later, just as kind of a unique item. Let's put it like Michael Moorcock and I did 2 stories back to back. And his was written when he was 17. Mine was written when I was a teenager.
That may be the ugliest book you've ever
It is an ugly book, yeah. But anyway, I think that when I got married, my wife is the most important person in my career. You know, my parents were important, but my wife was always supportive, and I sold an article that I wrote with my mother about the time that we were about to get married. I don't remember if we had been married yet or about to. And so I just, somehow with her, she made me more organized, because I think I was kind of all over the place. I have a lot of energy, and it's not always directed well, or was not always directed well before that. It has been since. And I found I could get things done. And I think that's, you know, she said, you need to go to bed. You can't stay up late. Because I hated to give up the day. I just hated always to give up a day. I would just, and I realized that I worked better when I would go to bed on time. I realized that I worked better if I had a regular schedule and none of this wait for inspiration crap. Because I don't believe in that. I believe you are your own inspiration, so what are you waiting for? Because I don't believe it's an outside source or anything. So I think really when I knew I was going to do it, I was a teenager, but when I was 21, I realized then that this was it.
How happy have you been with the movies and shows that have been created based on your work? Have you satisfied with the work?
He hates this one.
I've been very satisfied, to tell you the truth. The Bobo Hotel was surprisingly satisfying. You know, when Don Coscarelli first wanted to do that, he said, Joe, I want to do Bobo Hotel as a film. I said, oh, no, man. No, you can't do that. That won't work. He says, no, I believe it will. And I said, oh, no. And he says, I want an option. I said, Don, I don't want to take your money. He said, no, I want an option. I said, okay, I'll take your money. So he made a deal with my agent. And then when it didn't get made that year, he came back and optioned it again, along with Incident on and Off of Mountain Road. And the screenwriter for that is, Stephen's here somewhere. Yeah, there he is. He wrote Incident on and Off of Mountain Road for Don and was for Master of Horror. But when he did that, he said, you want to do the screenplay? Well, first of all, I didn't think it could be done. And second of all, Don's cheap. And you know, he has to be. He's doing low budget movies. And I just couldn't afford to, you know. And I didn't think it could be done. And then he did it, and I looked at it. I made a few suggestions. Bruce Campbell made a few suggestions. And they were off to the races. But I will tell you one kind of funny story about my son. Keith was, I don't remember how old Keith was then. You were young though. But you know, maybe not quite a big teenager. But he said, oh, Dad, you're going to have this movie made. Can you get my favorite actor? And I said, well, who's that? He said, Bruce Campbell. I said, oh, I don't get to pick, Keith. And then within a few days, a week or something like that, Don called and he said, hey, what would you think about Bruce Campbell? I said, I love it. Then I was my son's hero. He thought I did it, you know. So anyway, that was fun. And he and Bruce went riding around in Nacogdoches waving at cars and stuff like that. So you had a license, so, you know. Yeah. But anyway, or maybe Bruce was driving. I don't remember. Yeah. But anyway, that's how it all happened. It all came together, and I liked that movie a lot. Cold in July, I liked a whole lot. The Happy Leonard television series, I really liked them. Instant on Off of Mountain Road. I even had fun writing the Batman, the animated series. I've never had anything of mine I didn't like, but just wait a minute. It will happen, you know.
If anyone will give me the budget, I'll do the Magic Wagon. I love that.
Hi, I'm Colleen. So,
Hey. Hi,
hi. So I was wondering, why are you called the Popcorn King? Is it because of the dreams?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And the drive-in had popcorn.
Oh,
I
okay.
just got obsessed.
Really
with that.
bad popcorn.
I got really obsessed with that story when he told, because I asked him, you know, how the drive-in happened, and he told me about eating the popcorn and having these crazy dreams. So I literally asked every single interviewee, do you know about the popcorn thing? Is that true? Because I wasn't sure, like, was it just, you know, he's just telling me a story, you know, or was it really, like, you know, and so it just, I don't know, I just became obsessed. It was just the really most interesting thing for me.
And the drive-in has the Popcorn King as the villain in it.
Oh, yeah.
Ah, okay. It is one of the more interesting parts of the documentary. I mean, the whole thing's awesome, but, you know.
The animation, too, the animation is by two incredible animators, Yoshi Vu, who did some of the animation for Love, Death, and Robots, is it? Yeah, not on your pieces, but on others.
On the show.
And then Daniel Quills, who's a Marvel artist, and I met Yoshi at a con, and he's in Singapore working for Lucas right now. And I said, "You ever do any no budget stuff?" And he's like, "Well, I like to do small projects sometimes." And I'm like, "Well, I have this thing," and they did it for me, and yeah, it was. I couldn't believe how amazingly beautiful it was. And he goes, "I got this Marvel artist to help because I'm in Singapore working on a Lucas thing." I'm like, "Okay."
Oh, it's so cool.
Yeah, I thought it was beautiful.
I actually have a few questions. I'm sorry. So, also, what made you decide to do this in Austin and not, say, Nacogdoches?
Well, I thought we'd get a bigger audience in Austin.
Okay.
Honestly, I mean, we're going to screen at Nacogdoches Film Festival. We've already been invited, so that's going to happen. We're screening at is it Fright Fest in October 2020, and then George R.R. Martin has invited us to screen at his theater in Santa Fe in October.
Awesome.
So,
They're
yeah.
what they call the Lansdale Palooza.
Yeah. 2 days at Lansdale.
2 days, and
Yeah.
they're having Casey perform as a singer, and
She's performed there before, and they're having her boyfriend Jonathan Levitt, who is an amazing magician, be there. And then the next day they're going to show the documentary in Bobo Hotel, and so
Wow.
no, the documentary and Bobo Hotel. It might be a documentary. Isn't it?
And I will say that having been a bookseller here for like 30 years in this town, Joe is hugely popular in Austin, probably more popular than you are in any other Texas city, probably. So doing it here makes the most sense.
Well, I figured it's because it was the capital or something. But yeah.
It has to do with that, and also the venue.
Oh, okay. Cool. And one last question. Sorry, for Hansi. So you said you were inspired to do this documentary because you'd read some of his books, or what inspired you to do this documentary?
Well, I've been a fan of him since like the 80s, so most of my life. And then, I'd done the one on Joe Bob Briggs. And part of it was, as a thank you for his contributions to the Joe Bob Briggs thing. Because, when you ask someone to contribute something, and he wrote me something just for me and sent it to me in 24 hours. That's incredible. I mean, I couldn't, to have a writer like that take time out of his work schedule to write something for my film and get it back to me that fast, it was like, okay, I owe you. And then having access to him, because like Joe Bob Briggs, when I did the documentary about him, he's like, I'm not really happy about it, you can do it, I don't want to see it. And the replacements, when I did the documentary about them, they were like, the fans were more interesting than we were. So, they were very, very indifferent. Whereas with Joe was more than happy to tell me everything. So, having access to him was really unusual situation for me. So it was a really wonderful experience. It's a different documentary experience than I've ever done before. And it was the most fun I've had making a documentary.
Right. Thank you. I think Chuck here had
Just a quick question.
Chuck Berry.
You get to pay for it, so go ahead.
Hi, my name's Chuck.
Hi,
I'm addicted to Joe Lansdale. One thing that I really like about your writing is the way you incorporate weather events into them. You've had a bunch, and I guess my question is, what weather event haven't you written about that you would like to?
Earthquake.
Come to Los Angeles.
That's the shortest answer of the night.
We actually had an earthquake in East Texas, and it was in a little town near us, and they showed a picture of what the results, and it was a turned over lawn chair, and they said, we will rebuild.
There was a slight earthquake in St. Cloud, but I was at a Pink Floyd laser light show when it happened, and it was just a better effect.
All right, I think we have time for like 2 more questions, and then we're done.
Hey, Chris here. Hey, Joe. I can't believe I have any questions for you after we've done so many interviews together over the years. Like I think we've got 6 hours of interviews with you. But I want to say, Karen, great Buckaroo Banzai t-shirt. Do you still have that? So awesome. Love that movie. Second, Casey, I love your songs in the movie. So nice to hear your stuff. Happy you were there. Joe, in terms of the popcorn thing, everybody loves that story. I can't blame you for wanting to make that such a centerpiece of it. But you speak of it as being this thing that sort of inspired so many of the stories that you were telling, that spark that made the creativity flow. So what thing distresses your stomach now that inspires your stories?
They sort of come from a different place now, and I think a lot of it is that once those things inspire me, they open me up to a different way of thinking, and so now they'll come to me more rapidly without the popcorn, you know. And I think too that, you know, I was always able to come up with a story, but I was never able to come up with those kind of stories except with popcorn. Yeah, and they had one not real long ago that, I mean, I had one where we had popcorn, and it was one of those rare things. I think I was at the theater and I had it, and it kind of upset my stomach, and I had a weird story that's in the same ilk as those, so it's obviously connected to that kind of thing, at least in my mind.
I love Don Coscarelli's take on it. He's like, I think you should have the documentary, this scientific thing. Like, it's like...
Well, you know what they didn't say is that Don, when he came to visit,
I was messing with him. I did this with a lot of people, especially Yankees. They would come in to see me, and we had the downstairs floor, and that was where they would sleep. And I'd say, if the middle of the night the snake alarm goes off, don't worry about it. Just pick up your feet. And so Don all night's like looking for snakes in the house. You know?
That's great. Hey, Joe. Hey, I've had a question that I've been wondering about for a while. Now, you're very productive, but you're also one of the best at promoting yourself. You're really out there. You're all over the place. We've spoken multiple times. This guy says he's spoken to you a bunch of times. So I just wondered, how do you strike that balance? You're so out there and you're always promoting your work, but yet you're also so productive. Like, how does that happen?
I'm just gregarious by nature. And I like people. So even if I'm not promoting, it serves that purpose because I like visiting with people. I don't always have time to. I mean, I'm in one of those weird places where I have a tremendous amount of fandom, and if I did it all, I would be busy all the time. But I appreciate that, you know, because those people put beans on my table. So I'm proud of that. Also, I feel I should be giving back because I've been so fortunate. I came from a very poor background. You know, we weren't like destitute or anything, but we were poor, and I feel like that I've had such a wonderful life that it's up to me is to give back when I can, and that means if those interviews help other people be inspired or be able to write. It's not about just me, it's about the experience. If I can do this, and I think I'm reasonably talented, but there are people I started out with who are far more talented than me, but they didn't stick with it. And so I always tell people, if you want it, you gotta stay with it. So, and then the other way too, the people who buy my books, if they want to ask me questions and they want to know about them, I try to take the time to do it. I work 3 hours a day, that's it. People talk about how prolific I am. I work 3 hours a day. I show up to do my job, and I love what I do. Is it an art? I think so, but am I a craftsman? Yeah. And the idea that you wait 10 years to write a book does not make you smarter. It doesn't make you more artistic. It doesn't mean that somebody that writes it quick is good or bad. It just means it varies from person to person, how long they take, whatever. And so I try to get those things across, but that 3 hours in the morning is pretty sacred to me. And then I have martial arts. You know, I'm older now. I don't work in the same way I did. I mean, I had recent operations, double hernia operation. I'm just now starting to get back in where I can lose weight and start doing things again. But so I have to have time for that. I have to have time for reading. I have to have time for watching movies, TV, and most important, Nikki takes up a lot of time. And I've got to have the time for my family. You know, I try to be a part of my family's life more than anything. And I think it's the most important factor in the success that I've had, to what degree it is because I care about my family. And because my family means a lot to me. The fact that it's a wonderful thing to have kids that are also good people, good human beings, and I'm proud of them. And I appreciate that they have continued to go on in this field because I didn't push them to do that. I mean, Casey, her life was a musical. When she was little, she was always singing, you know. And Keith, he used to have his little toy typewriter, but I never knew for sure they would do those things. But by going out and talking to other people and having this other stuff in my life, family, martial arts, whatever, I think it shows that you can have a full career without abandoning your family. I have no respect for people who call abandoning their family a dedication to art. That's a dedication to assholism. And it's the idea is to show that you can do that too, if you know. So all of those things are connected. I know this sounds wider than what you asked, But that is what I do. I spend my time working, but then I spend my time doing other things so that life is more full, and that includes trying to connect with other people.
I think you're such an inspiration because I just don't know how you find the time to do all of that. I don't do half of the things that you do, and I struggle. I struggle all the time, so I just think you're an inspiration. I just want to tell you that.
Everybody's personality is different. I'm not saying my way is the best way, but I'm just saying you can do it.
All right, so we're gonna do a question.
I have one up here.
Well, I thought we were done, but
No,
okay.
no.
We're not done. Apparently Joe's not letting us go.
Who has any question up at the top? There you go.
Yeah, he's making his money. Look at him. He's paying for this.
I feel bad ending up here. So, my first introduction to your work was the Cold in July film, and I loved it. I didn't know it was a book until you told me. And then I've always been interested in hearing about just like the overall process of having something that you wrote turned into a film creatively. Is that like one of those things where, do you ever feel the need to like, do they ever ask you if you need to add something or just like take something out? Or just overall, whenever you're writing, how do you know what you want to change and how you decide what to take out and leave in?
Well, they did the screenplay, I didn't. And it was their movie, so I told them they could do whatever they wanted. But they did consult me, and they did listen to me some. The only thing I've ever had any blowback on was the Hap and Leonard series, because those guys are close to me. And sometimes I felt like that they were losing that control and taking it in a direction where I didn't want them to go. But they still got to do what they want. My deal is I was a producer on that, and a co-executive producer. And what I've always said, I get to say whatever I want, but they get to do whatever they want. And in some cases they listen to me, some not.
Well, then you were on the set every day.
I was on the set every day for the first season, just about. And my niece, who's up here, helped me a lot.
Hiding back there.
Yeah, hiding back there. She kind of handled, I was doing interviews for a book tour, I think then, and she was handling, connecting those things. She was making sure I was paying attention to what I was eating or whatever, because I was so involved in that. I think the only time I really had any problems on that first season was they wanted East Texas characters to say Halloween instead of Halloween. And so that made me really crazy. But a kind of cool story though is they asked me to come in and do a reading of all of the instructions in the script. Like he goes here, he does that. And they had a coach for teaching them how to do East Texas material. And so this is how it sounds and whatever. So I got through reading and that coach came over to me and said, "That's the best East Texas accent I've ever heard." I said, "Yes, ma'am, been working on it a long time."
All right, so I'm going to say that we're pretty much done here, and I'm going to say a couple of things and let you guys go and let Joe go and sign books for you.